these guys are so thorough. They've thought through every detail 1,000 times. They know it all. I mean, I even miss some of the Easter eggs sometimes that I don't know, you know, these really, I mean, even Vince, like I remember when we were doing El Camino and they were talking about some of the Easter eggs, there was one or two that he was like, I don't remember that. Like, so thankfully, you know, there's a whole group of people that kind of keep track of that stuff.
Let me get some, you dickhead.
First off, the show, for some reason, the aesthetic that we all fell in love with partly was being low, was looking up always. And especially when you have, you know, scary big characters like that, you know. But it's an aesthetic that we all fell in love with early on. But also when we were shooting that episode, that was during the rainy season, and we have these incredible clouds that are just amazing to watch and look at. So that's part of it too. You know, you get to see all of that crazy stuff. And I don't know if you watch El Camino, because Vince is a huge fan of clouds, and in El Camino there's not a single cloud to be found anywhere because we shot it during the wintertime, right before we started Saul, as a matter of fact, season 5. And so I knew going into this episode when the time of year that he was going to really embrace it this time, and we did. We try to tell a story with the visual. It has to, the script has to come first. The story has to come first.
Yeah.
And so that's all of our shots are kind of based in the script, and so that actually was something that I learned from the really kind of Michael Slovis. It was probably one of the most important lessons I've ever learned as a cinematographer, how important it is to drive everything by the story. It absolutely has to be based in the script.
Now, guys like you think you're so damn smart. You think you don't have to play straight with anybody. The wheel is gonna turn.
After they offered me the show, I realized that the show was actually making a big turn at the beginning of season 3. Vince, luckily, was directing the first 2 episodes of season 3. We did one in 301, 302 together as a kind of a big one giant episode. And he really kind of led me through the look of the show that he was looking for and the aesthetic and kind of where it was going. But he and Peter from the very beginning were very clear that they wanted me to, I mean, obviously, you know, like Chuck's house and sets that were already established. I couldn't, you know, I didn't want to change them too dramatically. But for the most part, they weren't looking for me to match anything, and they really wanted me, more importantly, to try to take risks and to bring the best show that I could bring.
I'm not unsympathetic to your sense of justice.
I remember there was an interesting conversation that I had with Peter about the way that they follow the story. That if they, as writers, that if they're really honest with themselves, that the story will lead them, not the other way around. And so that's kind of what they do. And one of the big things was Chuck's death. And Peter said, you know, it was awful. They were terrified. But every time they looked at it, there was just they just felt like they were taking a cheap way out by not embracing it. And it was just, that was the conclusion that needed to happen. And they kept trying to avoid it. And they finally just said, we've got to embrace it, you know?
Yeah.
Because Michael was such a pleasure and so good. So just an incredible actor. It was scary. And his place was phenomenal. I mean, the whole, you know, not having an electricity. I mean, it was just, you know, it was a photographer's dream. So it was scary to lose that set, I got to tell you. But they, you know, they, I mean, that's the way these guys are. They're true and honest to the story. And if that's the way it's going to go, then that's where it's going to go. And they got to take the risk.
Someone took the job to split the shooting scene into frames, and it's beautiful.
Yeah,
and then
I saw that. It's really cool. That was a special episode in that it's a Vince Gilligan episode. So Vince is very, very specific about the things that he wants. I mean, we get to sell him on ideas, and sometimes he takes them, sometimes he doesn't. For the most part, we stick to his. He actually boards out every shot. The shootout sequence literally was an entire week of our lives. That was a 5-minute, 6-minute scene, and I've never spent that much time on a television show on one scene ever. I've never spent that much time on an episode of television ever. I mean, we were almost 20 days, almost an entire month on that episode.
Yeah.
So but I mean, it was so special, and you know, everybody knew it going in, and it had its challenges. It was 100+ degrees, which is, you know, I don't know in Fahrenheit if you guys are Celsius, but it was very, very hot. People were getting ill. They had a cooling area, and it was a challenge. And then we would have these monsoon rains would come in, and we'd have to run. We lost a couple of days because of that. So yeah, it had its challenges. You know, we talk about a lot of the visual ideas before we go in. I mean, that whole chicken sequence was shot over a night. I think it was 2 nights in a location, and that was literally that was a fast food restaurant that the tractors were rolling up to smash, and our location people rolled up and begged them to stop, and then got permission to hold the place for months while we waited until we were going to go in there and you know, convert it into Pollos Hermanos and destroy the joint. But and it was an incredible explosion. I mean, and again, that particular episode was directed by Melissa Bernstein. It was her first time directing, and I had pitched her on that idea of coming with Gus across the street and watching the explosion behind him, and then walking him into the car and just seeing that reflection of the place burning in the glass. And she loved the idea, and we went for it, and thank God it worked. Because you know, who knows when you, what pyrotechnics of what's going to burn. I mean, you know, I can take an educated guess. I've seen a few of these, but who knows, you know?
So you blew up the entire restaurant. You blew it up for real.
Yeah, no, we absolutely did. We absolutely did. It was huge explosion. I mean, we were all the way across the street, you know, 20 feet back from where his car was, and we could all feel the heat. And we had 6 cameras working on that shot, and they used the main 80-camera shot, and then just one more shot that was hidden behind the sign looking up at it. The only 2 shots they used. But you know, when it works well that way, it works. And, and that's part of their genius, is that they don't. There's no preciousness for that stuff. When you get into the editing room, everything's got to have an equal quality, an equal voice. So you can't say, well, I got to use that crane shot because we paid for the crane. You know.
Yeah.
It has to work.
Welcome to my world.
One of the great things that make this show, I think, special in a lot of ways is that ideas can come from anywhere. Good idea can come from anywhere on the set. And so we're very collaborative with the entire camera department, especially the camera operators, coming up with ideas. And so everybody's kind of throwing ideas out there. And, you know, they will always say that, you know, a group is much smarter or much more creative than any single person can be. And so, you know, I get all the credit for it, but it's a group effort.